is like a world of trade-offs and competing objectives, or maybe not. And I think the question is, are there some alignments, and is there something that can be forged that is integrated and not mutually exclusive? So it's a fascinating set of issues, I think, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to unpack that, and that we have a very distinguished panel to help us guide us through this conversation. So let me introduce my panel, and let me begin perhaps with the room, where to my left we have Mamta Murthy, who is the Vice President of the People Vertical in the World Bank Group, and then we have Bill O'Keefe, Vice President of the Catholic Relief Service, CRS. Online, we have Her Excellency Ms. Afra Abdulaziz Al-Zuba, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation in Yemen. We have Catherine Russell, who's the Executive Director of UNICEF. We have Jean-Jacques Perussi, Governor of South Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we have Mr. Mohamed Ramahi, Director of the Municipal Development and Lending Fund in Palestine. So different regions, different perspectives, different roles. And I think this bodes for a very interesting conversation. My name is Christian Bodewig. I'm the World Bank Group Director for Education and Skills, and kind of moonlighting here to take you through that conversation. So maybe to kick us off, I would like to take us to Yemen and to ask Her Excellency, the Minister from Yemen, to give us her perspective on the lay of the land. Yemen really offers one of the most instructive examples of the humanitarian development cooperation under extreme and sustained pressure. So, Your Excellency, if I were to, can invite you to come in and share your experience on whether humanitarian development actors in your setting have a clear enough sense of their distinct roles, and what collaboration looks like. Is there what is called mandate creep or objective creep? And also, as resources shrink, what does that do to that interface? So let me give the floor to you, but let me, as I do this, recognize the loss of Wessam Kaid.
She's been disconnected.
She's been disconnected.
So she'll connect again, but perhaps we can start with Catherine.
Okay, so then let's go to Catherine. Good to see you on the screen. Let me hand to you then and kick us off. And give your perspective for an organization that straddles the humanitarian and the development approach, and get your perspective on, what happens, what are the challenges as humanitarian organizations, work through host governments and have the dual objective of delivering, but also strengthening capacity and with a view on the long term. And what perhaps you can reflect on, what is the advice you would give development practitioners from that humanitarian perspective? Over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christian. And it's really nice to see you. Well, let me start by explaining a little bit about what UNICEF does, which is essentially we operate in more than 190 countries and territories, including some of the world's most complex and protracted crises. So Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, Myanmar, Afghanistan, across the Sahel, and many others. We have a dual humanitarian and development mandate, which means that we respond to the immediate needs of a population, and at the same time try really hard to invest in strengthening national and local systems. So in protracted conflicts and crises, systems break down. And of course, children can't wait for political settlements. They need healthcare, education, protection, nutrition, clean water, the whole list of things that children everywhere in the world need. And that's why in those protracted settings, the question is rarely whether to work with governments. The real question is how, when, under what circumstances. And the answer often changes as the situation evolves. So in practice, we use a range of approaches depending on the context, the risk, which is a hugely important consideration, and of course, the needs of children. So where systems continue to function and where engagement doesn't compromise humanitarian principles, or place populations at risk, we try to align with national and subnational systems because, like I said, we're always trying to build up these systems and build up the capacities of governments. So good examples of that are Lebanon or the work we're doing now on the Ebola response in the DRC and Uganda. In other very complex settings where systems are disrupted, we maintain parallel humanitarian delivery mechanisms while still continuing to invest in future system capacity. It's not ideal, but it's the only choice we have in these settings. So good examples of that are Gaza. During the conflict, we have had to provide services directly with our partners while working with technical authorities where possible. Another example is in the refugee settings in Ethiopia. There, it was interesting because UNICEF and our partners and the government supported a transition from delivering water by truck, which is what you have to do in emergencies because it's usually the only option, but it's really expensive, to building permanent water systems through local authorities. And this created a more sustainable solution both for the refugees and for the host communities. In any situation, our priority is to work extensively through local actors, including community health workers, teachers, social workers, as well as community organizations, civil society partners, subnational authorities, particularly in contested or hard to reach areas. Why? Because we know that locally owned approaches are more sustainable and legitimate, and of course, they build local capacity. Truthfully, there are rarely perfect options in crises. We face challenges in trying to balance immediate access and effective service delivery with national ownership and principles of do no harm. And we are required to navigate very complex trade-offs. For example, we see tension when we are trying to ensure health services for children living in areas controlled by non-state armed groups, while also working through national systems that may have little or no presence in those locations. That can be very complicated politically to do, but we try to do our best. And at the same time, we're mindful of the risk of creating parallel structures. We also see that maintaining UN or NGO oversight may be necessary to mitigate genuine risks of aid diversion, to safeguard principled engagement, and to ensure accountability. Managing these competing imperatives really is at the heart of the effective humanitarian and development engagement that we're engaged in these complex operating environments. Striking the right balance, honestly, is not always that easy, and it has become even more challenging with the funding cuts that we and other organizations are facing. The recent cuts really are forcing humanitarian organizations to concentrate on the most acute needs and life-saving interventions, which is understandable when you're faced with those decisions. But that risks important activities that build longer-term resilience, like education and child protection. And I have to say, from the UNICEF perspective, and I think there's no question that this is right, that both education and child protection have to be considered life-saving interventions. And I think now with some of the pressure on the funding, that's becoming more of a question in the minds of some, but certainly not for us. So in terms of advice for development partners, I'll just give you a few things. One, I think we have to try to build flexibility and adaptation into programs from the outset. These protracted conflicts evolve so quickly sometimes, and rigid program designs often struggle to keep pace with that. So I think adaptive programming, scenario planning, flexible financing mechanisms are really critical. Second, we have to really start with a political economy analysis, not the technical design of a program, because understanding in these settings who holds the power, who benefits from existing arrangements, and what incentives shape behavior is really essential. Technical solutions are rarely successful if they're disconnected from these political realities that we're facing every day. Third, we have to rigorously assess the risks in programmatic design while keeping an eye on long-term opportunities. Assessments really have to consider risk to beneficiaries, to staff, risk to access, risk to humanitarian principles. But we have to be forward-leaning at the same time in our risk-taking. And, at UNICEF, that is like a daily assessment by most people who work here of trying to get that balance right. And it's not easy. There are real dilemmas, and sometimes we have to make some difficult trade-offs, but trying to assess that risk constantly is really challenging. And finally, I think we have to remain laser focused on building and preserving systems. Again, I just cannot say this strongly enough. None of us want to be in these situations long term. We want to make sure that if there is an opportunity to move into more of a development setting, that we have systems, at least the very beginnings of systems, in place, no matter how fragile they are. Because ultimately, we want to protect whatever investment we've already made, and we want to protect whatever hard-won gains we have. And I think starting from scratch, once we move into a more secure setting is a mistake. And that only will happen if we don't really make the smart investments from the outset. So, I mean, it's a lot of information. I'm sorry to sort of get that all in there, but I think it gives you a sense of the complexities we're dealing with and how really sort of understanding these difficulties from the outset makes a big difference.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. Very clear, a lot, but very clear. And I think that clarity is what is needed in guiding conversations like this. I see that Minister Al-Zuba is not yet reconnected. So let us then perhaps continue immediately with Bill in the room and ask you kind of a similar question from your perspective, and maybe perhaps look deliberately from the dynamic of, as, crises start and kind of, decisions are made at the beginning, and there's certainly a path dependency very often when there's a risk of crisis turning into protracted situations. So basically the question is, speed versus sustainability, do no harm versus the risk of inaction. Your reflections on that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'll just give a quick commercial for CRS. We're the American Catholic Communities International Relief and Development Organization in about 100 countries, and it's wonderful for us to be included on this panel. Over the last 10 years, we collectively have learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work in fragile contexts, particularly when it comes to operating in the humanitarian development, peacekeeping, or peace-building nexus. We cannot wait to address the causes of crises, even as we respond to the symptoms. Consequently, the choice between humanitarian assistance, development, and peace-building to us is a false one. Before talking, though, about how we address the initial stages of conflicts in ways that might limit their damage or length, I do need to say that governments, including my own, I'm an American citizen, are not doing enough to prevent these crises. Pope Leo has lamented that war is back in fashion. And as someone who spent 38 years at CRS picking up the pieces of conflict, this is totally unacceptable. Humanitarianism, development, and peace building can't bring children back to life and ease the grief of their parents. I just have to say, no more war. Those of you who have any influence over that, please. Okay, to your questions. While each situation is unique, across all of them, broken trust between people and the state is really at the heart of fragility. Let me break this down a little bit. Restoring trust between groups of people who've been in conflict or are otherwise divided by elites requires reweaving the fabric of communities across the divide at a human level. I like what Catherine said, certainly at kind of the governmental, subnational level, and we're really focused at the human level. These divisions create opportunities for power-hungry elites or extremist groups to attract support, further dividing communities and further fueling conflict. CRS uses a 3B methodology that builds peace by strengthening trust and relationships at 3 levels: within individuals, so psychologically and spiritually, it's called binding; within groups, bonding; and then between groups, bridging. And that helps us to create the social cohesion necessary for durable peace. With rebuilding trust at the center, several things matter most at the initial stages of a response to be more effective in crises that may become protracted. First, focus on the human experience. When people have suffered trauma and lose trust between people and each other or their institutions, meeting material needs is not sufficient. People want to feel safe, secure, and treated with dignity. CRS programs have a unique opportunity to address this by being intentional about building social cohesion. Attending to social cohesion should start immediately upon initiating any humanitarian response. You asked about do no harm. Do no harm and conflict sensitivity are necessary, but no longer sufficient. We need a mindset shift. We shouldn't be satisfied with not making things worse, which is sort of the spirit of do no harm, but instead we need to make them better. Rather than simply aiming to do no harm to relationships, we rely on trusted partners to understand unique conflict dynamics and actively rebuild trust at the human and community level where broken relationships exist. CRS partners are both faith-based and secular, and we connect them with local government actors in order to try to make sure that the community efforts level up and then level back down to government. Our local partners are not just, kind of subcontracted implementers, but are co-creators. In the STAR project in the Lake Chad region, which is funded by the German government, it may look like we're just helping communities build water points or reconstruct a school or a market, but these activities are organized carefully to bring people who were once on opposite sides of the conflict into shared spaces. And that's where trust begins to grow. Spending time on committees together, solving problems together, building infrastructure together, and spending time at water points together provides the platform for rebuilding trust with a purpose. These processes take time and don't always go according to plan. We often find that the real community level conflict dynamics only become clear over time. Relationships coming out of conflict are unpredictable and take time to rebuild. Responses need longer time frames with as flexible an approach as possible. I'm certainly just doubling down on what Catherine said here. Funding models need to recognize this reality. When donors support multi-year approaches, we can layer and sequence responses effectively. For example, in the STAR project, we manage for new conflicts between herders and agriculturalists over time because the situations are complex and are constantly dynamic. Timing also matters. Cash for work projects that bring people together must take place after the harvest because farmers are more likely to have time for them then. When people have cash, we help organize silk or savings and internal lending cooperatives that bring people together to save together and then invest those savings in productive activities within their communities. These bottom-up social cohesion approaches are always or almost always underfunded, but are critical to rebuilding trust. They complement top-down political processes. Rebuilding trust between the state and its people means helping the state meaningfully and inclusively improve the lives of all citizens. I think this is just one of the biggest challenges we see all around the world right now. Responses must support existing systems and institutions, both formal and informal, and particularly the ones that reach the last mile. Supporting basic delivery of services to a population in need through existing systems doesn't just meet humanitarian needs, though, but also builds capacity, provides livelihoods and jobs for service workers, and has other short-term and long-term impacts. Several speakers during this event have talked about the private sector as job creating, which of course it is, but the public sector is too, particularly in these kind of situations. Finally, I'll just say that market systems are also critical. Private sector and effective market-based approaches can respond to need while sustaining the economic structures for the future. Cash is more effective, but we need to focus on the informal local market systems and not just what is in the formal infrastructure. If we understand the context of fragility in these human terms, we know that these are not really trade-offs. Choosing between speed versus scale or urgent versus durability is just not an option right now, we feel. We spent decades building and honing our approaches, and we know what we need, but donors need the courage and the risk appetite to support. Finally, I'll just say I was a chemistry major in college, and while I didn't do anything with it, frankly, I'm not sure why I did it. It did teach me about the second law of thermodynamics, and you're wondering, why is he saying this? The reason is, in layperson's term, this scientific law means that all systems and bonds decay without the input of energy. Unless we invest in preserving and, when needed, rebuilding social, cultural, economic, and political bonds and the trust that holds them together, then all societies, especially those most fragile, will descend into chaos. Our job is to provide the energy, the funding, and the strategies to prevent this. The longer we wait in an initial response, the harder and more expensive the effort will be when we get around to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you. A little chemistry lesson, didn't come for that, but there you get it, right? Thanks so much. Let's go to Yemen. I see that the minister is now connected, and Minister Al-Zuba, give the floor to you to reflect a little bit on the Yemen experience of the interaction of humanitarian and development actors in a protracted situation that is evolving, and where are there a number of trade-offs. And from your perspective, is there sufficient clarity of objectives? What are the challenges around that alignment, if you were to unpack that for us? And as I hand over the floor to you, I just want to for all of us to recognize the loss of Wissam Qaid, the Deputy Managing Director of the Yemen Social Fund for Development, who passed in a violent incident very recently. But Your Excellency, let me hand the floor over to you, and thanks for connecting. We can't hear you, so there may be a mute issue. Now we can. Very good. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to contribute to this very important discussion, especially at this very important period of time for Yemen and also for countries in fragile contexts. First, I echo what you have just mentioned about Wissam Qaid. We lost development champion. We lost a person who made a big difference in many, Yemeni families. And, he used to be a model in the way that he shaped the work with the farmers, with the fishermen, with the women, with the youth. And really our loss, where Wissam was very big. So, and hopefully we wish that Yemen can find, good people and who can replace him and, continue his path. On your question about the Yemeni context and the humanitarian development nexus, let me walk you through the Yemeni situation. As you know, our Yemen used to be classified as fragile state even before the current conflict, and unfortunately, due to that fragility, I think it was very important root cause for being trapped in the current conflict. Immediately after the conflict, was erupted, there was like a social movements from the people in civil society, NEPR, youth activists, initiatives, who run immediately to cover the needs of the IDPs, of the sieged neighborhoods, cities, who delivered immediate support to the families and to the people and who was affected or were affected badly due to the current war. And then maybe after a couple of months, the international support started to come to Yemen. And since then, for more than 10 years, there was huge humanitarian operations run in Yemen. And the classification of the situation in Yemen, unfortunately, it has not been changed. Time by time, the situation continued to be classified as urgent, as catastrophic. And the fund used to be directly channeled to humanitarian, to food supply, supporting health services, supporting some, shelter and water services. And suddenly, by time the support started to decline as result of of donors fatigue, and then as we know, just the last 2 years there was shortcuts, severe shortcuts in the funds, not just to Yemen but globally. And suddenly we, as Yemeni institutions and Yemeni people, we found ourselves alone. There is no support, there is no funds, families that used, to receive food supply for years, suddenly they don't have access to food. Food price globally increased. Many, emerging shocks and crises also added on top of the current war. So we have the climate change, floods, drought seasons, water scarcity, climate change affecting stock, fish stock, affecting agricultural products, new displacements. And on top of this, it's come the regional crisis, the current regional crisis, with increase in fuel price, increase in imports prices, especially the essential goods, and the issue of the fertilizers and the seeds, on top of all of this. And beside this too, we found ourselves as state institutions don't know what to do. There wasn't enough engagement for the state institutions during the humanitarian response times. And when we were discussing with the humanitarian, institutions, they said in crisis situation we try to work away from government institutions because these are the best practices to deliver fairly and unbiased support to different communities. So what's the result now? The result, we discussed it with our partners, including now the World Bank Group, and they understand this issue, and fortunately we have also have same discussions with the other donors about building the capacity of state institutions, the resilience, engaging more in partnership, not just as as consultative mechanisms, but rather than partnership in deciding and talking about the best way of delivering basic services. So still until now we are in Yemen working just to protect the basic services, just to ensure not the fair distribution of the basic services, not the delivery, not even the access, the affordability. We are still discussing with our partners, do they have enough fund to continue to support the operational cost of these health services or no? Do they have a better explanation and preparation for exit strategies or no? So we are now in the basic state, just to ensure that we are not under danger of collapsing the basic services. On the other hand, when we start to discuss about the development interventions, we find now gradually things become improved gradually. But what we learned, what we hear from our partners is that you are in conflict country, and development interventions is not that it suits your needs so far. So and we struggled for a long time just to prove that development and long-lasting interventions is needed to protect the life of people, and not just on the long run, even now. So I think recently I noticed this during these couple of, maybe from last year until now, there are, talk about this, humanitarian development nexus. We come to a good agreement with our partners about, how can we continue for specific groups, or community groups, that some humanitarian support should continue to be provided to them, but with some sort of mechanisms that ensure durability and sustainability. So if we are speaking about health services, so let us talk more about enabling the ministry, enhancing the capacity of the ministry to develop an exit strategy and ensure that these services will not be collapsed, just due to the shortage of funds, And in addition to that, I would like also to mention here that building the capacities of the state institutions. Fortunately, again, during this, I think, from the mid of last year until now, we started to hear good news about channeling support through national institutions, including, like Social Fund for Development, including public works, some project management units within ministries, and this we consider it as a very important step to for localization, for improving the capacity of the national institutions, and not to leave it alone when, especially in such shocks. Finally, I really think that the Yemeni experience, I think it deserves to be studied and to be tackled seriously, as in the humanitarian aid literature, and it helped at some point of time, but then I think there should be at some point of time some revision of that mechanisms, not to leave it for more than 10 years without critical analysis and critical critical discussion about the viability and the effectiveness of such efforts. These are some remarks about the Yemeni context and the humanitarian development agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for connecting and for giving us the readout of the perspective from Yemen, including highlighting how the current shock in the region, affects the cost of living, which kind of comes on top of a very fragile situation, and then how that new dynamic also plays out in what is a complex setting. Let us go back to the room, and I would like to turn to Mamta and get your reflection. At the beginning, when I introduced the session, I talked about these competing logics of once delivering at scale where it's feasible, avoiding choices that could do harm, as it were, and then building, prioritizing the building of systems. So are these trade-offs? How to align those? What are your perspectives on this?
Thank you so much, Christian. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, also amongst so many distinguished panelists and also friends. So let me begin with two stage-setting things. First of all, we know that poverty is going to be concentrated in FCV countries, and so as a development institution, we have to think about doing development, supporting development in FCV if we are serious about reducing poverty, right? That's a sine qua non. The second thing I want to say is that actually development can happen in fragile contexts, and it's about being adaptive. It's about understanding the local context. It's about working through credible local institutions, as Catherine said. But it's patient capital, if I can use a financial term. It's something that you do over the long haul. It's not instant coffee. I had a colleague who used to say that development is not instant coffee, and development in a fragile context is certainly not instant coffee. Now, your question, Christian, I actually see this, being effective in service delivery, in doing no harm, and building durability, sustainability. I see these as tensions in supporting development rather than trade-offs. I'd actually like to go further and say I don't see a trade-off, and slightly overstating the point, but it's to make the point. How can one talk about being effective if you're not really including everybody in service delivery, right? How can one talk about being effective if one is not working in a way that builds trust and supports institutional development, right? And that's what ensures sustainability. So I see these as tensions that have to be worked through rather than trade-offs. Now, let me give a couple of examples, and I'm not trying to flatter you, Kristen, but you worked on the Sahel Adaptive Social Protection Program, and this was really about starting small, working with local communities, making sure that one is aware of the tensions and covering everybody with very small grants, which then the women were able to grow into slightly larger sums of money, right? By having a kitchen garden or engaging in small craft and so on. And this was actually quite successful at both supporting local and community development and improving outcomes. But it took time. So I think that's one recognition that actually working in this very sustainable way that is inclusive can take time, and we need to understand that. A second point I want to make is that we also have to recognize that doing this kind of work can be a little costlier in terms of dollar amounts or local currency amounts. But this is not a cost to be minimized, right? This is just a part of doing business. I'm really happy that under our new FCV strategy, when we're talking about education service delivery in FCV context, and again, a shout out to you, Catherine, I think it's a fundamental thing that has to be delivered in all contexts. The FCV strategy actually says we have to recognize that delivering services in fragile contexts, especially education, is going to be costlier. Let's just take that as a given and work with that. So I hope I've been able to make the point that these are not tensions, but these are not trade-offs. They're tensions, but they can be reconciled. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop. I'd like the opportunity to come back in because I've been talking about development in fragile contexts, but there's also conflict, active conflict, where I think we might need a slightly different approach.
We will get back to that in the second round of the session. But let me now take us to DRC and hand the floor to Governor Jean-Jacques Perussi and invite you to give us a bit of your perspective in terms of the roles and responsibilities of reaching people in an environment where the control, the geographic control isn't clear and may not be under the government control. I obviously also want to recognize the conditions at the moment in DRC with Ebola, and just want to wish you that we're getting through this and in good health. So an additional layer on that protracted fragility that disrupts things even more. Governor, over to you, and thanks for connecting from DRC.
Thank you very much. Hello to everybody. Just, South Kivu province is one of the 26 provinces which form the country, our country, DRC. And South Kivu province, as you may know, is occupied, 40% of the province is occupied by Rwandan-backed rebel movements known as AFC M23 since, let's say, January 2025. And as the governor, we were obliged to leave the capital city, which is Bukavu, to Uvira, which is the second city. From there, we are ruling. Out of the province has 4 cities and 8 territories. So we control 4 territories and 3 cities, and Rwanda controls the rest of the territory. Just to say that quickly, the situation in the occupied zones by the rebel Rwandan-backed movement for M23 occupied zones is as following. We are facing in those zones, we are facing a variety of challenges, including forced taxations, and whatever money is being collected by the established authorities is just brought back to Rwanda. Illegal exploitation of mineral resources, as you may know. Mass killings, we are also facing rape, abductions. Now, you just mentioned the Ebola outbreak in South Kivu, especially in Bukavu and surrounding areas. Proliferation of armed groups, including small arms and light weapons. Illegal development projects have been simply interrupted. All the projects, our provincial development plan has been brutally interrupted, and all the bigger projects that we initiated with the support of the World Bank, the UN agencies and other development partners have been simply interrupted. And all the equipment which was found, the infrastructural equipment, has just been brought to Rwanda by the M23. Now, what are the government positions? First of all, with regard to the assistance of the affected population, the position of the rebel movement is that, they are pushing, they are really trying to attract as much as international partner they can attract to come to develop, to engage some development projects and humanitarian assistance to the population in the rebel controlled zones. And so is another opportunity not only to assist the populations, but it's also the way to legitimate the illegal occupation. At least this is the position of the government. So what is the government position in this? For the government, I'm talking about the central government, and this is the position of the provincial government, my provincial government. For the government, instruction has been given that in the rebel controlled zones, assistance, development projects should never be developed. At least humanitarian assistance should be provided to the population, but not development, longer term projects should never be developed there, because it will be a way to recognize exactly the rebel movements and to push or to encourage a longer term establishment of this rebel movement. So when any partner comes to engage in development partnership with these rebel movements, whether they are private sectors, where they come from the international partnership, this is not really well accepted by the government, because they say, okay, if those partners try to develop project there, it means that now they're accepting, they're recognizing these de facto authorities, and this is not really something which the government is accepting. It is to legitimate this government. So on the government controlled zone, this is the zone where we are ruling in South Kivu province. For those one who know this location, this is Uvira, Fizi, Mwenga, Shabunda territories. Yes, the government is really pushing the partners to come to develop some concrete projects to assist the population, to provide humanitarian assistance. As a matter of fact, yes, there is also some humanitarian challenges that we are facing with a variety of farm groups, with some human rights violations. But again, these are issues that we are trying to tackle on our side. But the government is really encouraging the partners to come on board and come and assist. Now, as a governor, how do we operate? We ensure, first of all, that we apply international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and the right-based approach in all the programs and projects that we are undertaking. We are, since our engagement there, we have been ensuring that humanitarian assistance, we have opened the humanitarian corridors between the rebel-occupied zones and the zones which are controlled by the government of our government. We ensure that we engage women's organizations, youth groups as well, in the activities, in all activities in the program that we are trying to put in place. How now, if it is to provide some recommendation and advices to the international community, what should be done really? I know that on the government side, they say, okay, we don't accept any intervention in the rebel control zone. Everything should come to the government control zones. But what we, as former humanitarian actors, as now government officials, we should recommend is, first of all, we don't engage development without peace. And as United Nations, World Bank, based on our experience now ruling in South Kivu, we strongly believe that you have everything, you have the cards on your hands to push the key stakeholders to really materialize the commitment, the peace agreement which have been signed. As you may know, the peace agreement to end this war in Eastern Congo has been signed. There are 3 agreements underway. One is the Washington Peace Agreement between President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and President Tshisekedi of Congo. The second one is the government of Congo and M23, Rwandan-led M23 movement, which has been signed in Doha, in Qatar, and which has been now delocalized in Switzerland. So what should be done, on my view, to be concrete, is that World Bank, UN agencies, NGOs should really focus on trying to put an end to the contribute to put an end to the conflict. Concretely speaking, is just to push Paul Kagame and President Tshisekedi to engage, to commit to stop the war. If these 2 persons decide to sit together and say we decide to end this war, the war will end. And if they don't accept, then put pressure on them. You have the cards on your hands. So this is really my opinion. I know millions of US dollars, that billions even, that the World Bank is engaging in the DR Congo. I know billions of US dollars that, not only UN, but World Bank as well, the financial partners. I know how much money you are engaging in Rwanda, in Burundi, in Uganda to support reconstruction of these countries or development of these countries. If you decide that we shut down this help until Paul Kagame and Tshisekedi reach an agreement to end this war, Rwanda will withdraw their troops and Congo will reach its agreement. So why this is not, I mean, this is where we should really touch. There is no development, there is no business without peace. And on my view, and really I'm talking from the realities which we are facing on a daily basis. I have, for instance, the World Bank, which has great, fantastic project in Uvira, in the control zone where I control. It's almost $1 billion US project, infrastructural project. I don't want to provide details. But if we don't have these projects, I mean, then the situation will simply collapse. So if you put pressure on our head of state, say, okay, if you don't want to reach your agreement that we have signed in front of President Trump and other key stakeholders, then we withdraw from these commitments. Believe me, I can ensure that our president will make some steps. Another thing, this should be also done on Rwanda, on Burundi, on Uganda, all the key stakeholders to ensure that they reach their agreement. I was following President Trump's last declaration, the DRC, and a few days ago, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has done a very strong, very tough statement against the Rwanda regime and say, okay, if you don't withdraw from the eastern part of Congo, if Rwanda doesn't withdraw from eastern part of Congo, then we'll take necessary measures as we did in Venezuela to reach an agreement. But again, this kind of position has been made several times. But when they pushed the Rwandese army, M23 led, to withdraw from Uvira where we sit, what happened? They just withdrew from 15 kilometer from there. They went to Sange, while there was a request to withdraw from there to 75 kilometers. As we are talking today, fighting are going on. They are killing near Uvira, drones attacks from both sides. This should stop. And I think that if you put and then you touch this financial issue, I think that would be very critical. Push these actors to reach an agreement. Another one,
Governor, let me. I'm sorry to disrupt you, but I want to make sure that we bring all our panelists in, and we can come back to you in the second round. I'm very keen to take us to West Bank and Gaza and bring in Mohammed Ramahi. Catherine and Bill were referring to the importance of local level service delivery, and I want to really invite you to bring in the perspective on the role of local government, municipalities, village councils, etc., in delivering durable services, especially when there are challenges in central government effectiveness to deliver. So your reflection based on your experience would be very helpful to come in. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, and thank you for inviting me to this panel with your distinguished guests. So thank you very much. So unfortunately for the Palestinians, we have ongoing instability. And from the Amdallah experience over the last 2 decades, I would like to highlight 5 key lessons on service delivery in a fragile context because of the, let's say, limitation of time. So I will highlight these points, and maybe during the discussion, if any other elaboration will be. So for us, the first one, fragility is not uniform. So even in the same country, like Palestine, different areas experience very different realities. For example, if you take for Gaza Strip, with the mass destruction and then the damages for all the municipal services, and the municipalities are not able to provide services, to the northern part of West Bank, where there is, let's say, repeated invasions to the cities by the occupation and destroying all the, let's say, municipal infrastructure, and the forced displacement to the people from the, let's say, refugee camps, which make more burdens on the municipalities in providing services. To Area C, where is like restrictions on movement and confiscation of lands, and trying to prevent even the central government or us to provide the basic services for the people who are living in these villages in Area C. And then for the refugee camps, which recently there was also damages inside these, and the people are forced to be displaced in different places. So this leads us to a lesson that we need to look and how we can develop solutions that cannot be standardized. So it means that we need to know well the reality on the ground and start developing our solutions and programs and interventions accordingly. And these programs should be flexible and adapted to local realities and evolving needs on the ground. The second lesson that I would like to highlight, local governments are the foundation of resilience. Municipalities and village councils are the closest public institutions to the citizens. They are the first responders during crisis, the most visible face of government, and sometimes the only institution that remains operational during periods of instability. Their ability to continue delivering basic services directly influences community resilience and social stability, especially in crisis. The third, maintaining institutional functionality is itself a development achievement. So in fragile settings, success should be measured not only by, let's say, what we build, it should also be measured by what we preserve. So when municipalities, communities continue to provide services and respond to the real needs for the citizens on the ground, despite the difficult circumstances, they are preserving institutional continuity, public trust, and social cohesion. Because of this, we in the MDLF, in the Municipal Development Fund, we focus how we can, let's say, build and improve the capacities of the local government units. We have a program. We have multi-donors contributing to that program, which is the Resilience Municipal Service program. We have a performance allocation mechanism. Based on the performance of the municipalities, we give them funds for infrastructure projects, and we have a ranking system. So when they graduated to upper level, also they get more. So this is the incentive in order to improve, let's say, their performance. And there is a capacity building packages that we provide to the municipalities and some of the village councils in order to improve their, let's say, performance. We're not challenging them, we're helping them. One of the main lessons that we learned, that we work with the local government units in order to prepare them how they can deal with the, let's say, foreseen, let's say, crisis coming, because we are living in not a normal life. So we started with the municipalities and supporting them in developing resilience plans and crisis management plans. And this is in a participatory approach with the community, with the government institutions, with the social, with the NGOs and other local stakeholders. And then the community should at least start thinking what kind of crisis they may face and how they can deal with that in the future, as we are in a daily phases of having a closure, we having, let's say, invasions and so on. And then it's not only at the level of the municipality. We just the most important thing that we link that with the governorate plans in order to have shared plans with among other cities and towns in order to have a more comprehensive planning, because we found out that one local government units cannot respond efficiently to the crisis when the crisis happens. So there should be some kind of cooperation, assistance from the others in order to come up. For example, the big municipalities can provide support to small communities by their, let's say, heavy equipments and so on. And that, I think, is very important lesson that we learned. The fourth lesson, resilience required integrated rather than separate approaches. And I think this is one of the most important lessons that we learned, and we managed to implement it through and with our financing partners that you cannot, let's say, design a program completely for development, and also you cannot develop a program fully for, let's say, emergency. So what we managed to do, that we managed in the resilient municipal service program, we managed to bring, let's say, investment in infrastructure investment, capacity building, and emergency in one framework that it gives us flexibility when crisis happens that we can move. For example, in this program, when we have a crisis, we just managed to convince our financing partners to participate and to give us funds in order to finance the operational expenditures for the municipalities as they are not able to provide services, especially for the solid waste. If we didn't act immediately and to support our local government units in that regard, I think there will be a crisis, not only, even with this kind of crisis, then there will not be stability in the community and there is no trust with the local government units because they're not able to provide, let's say, the services. Finally, I will just say that the local government units cannot, let's say, resilience depends on efficient multi-level governance. It means that local governments cannot address fragility alone. National institutions provide policy directions, regulations, and strategic leadership, while local governments understand the needs on the ground and they are more able and capable to provide the services on the ground. So we're not here asking which to choose. Is it the local government or the central government? I think the answer is that we need to look who can provide the service and who is better in providing the service in the time of a crisis. And this is how we can build, let's say, a governance system that can, let's say, respond efficiently to the needs on the ground at the time of the crisis. Finally, I'm not going to take too much, just 1 minute if you allow me. In conclusion, our experience in the Alhamdulillah has taught us that resilience is not temporarily phase between crises, it's the development agenda itself. Durable development outcomes are achieved when local governments are empowered, institutions remains functional, communities are engaged, and programs are designed to build, respond, and adopt at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mohammed. Thanks a lot for those perspectives and those 5 lessons. So, as ever, the enemy is time, or time is the enemy. But let's work with time and try to figure out a way forward and work through the tension of time. Let's open the floor for questions from the audience, and let's go to the room first, and then we'll also take a look online. And Mamta, I will come back to the question on conflict and the most complicated setting and what to do. But if you want to speak, raise your arm, and there is a roaming microphone. The gentleman in the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Galine Yanon from UNICEF. I work on resilience fragility. So it's a very big honor for me to be here, and I'm very glad to listen to these distinguished panelists. So thank you so much for inviting us. So I've been listening to all the panelists, and I must say that there are very rich and deep analysis that have been provided here. But something I want also to share with you, going through all the countries that we call fragile, affected and conflict-affected setting. So I spent 2 decades going through all those countries and communities. And one thing I can say is that we know what is not working. We know what is working, but we even also know why it's not working. And one element that I didn't hear about it in the room is the flexibility. How flexible are we with the programming? Are we with the funding? Because when we talk about conflict affected or this fragile setting, the common denominator is fragility. And when we talk about fragility, we talk about also instability. And when we talk about instability, we talk about changing constantly. So when things change from night to day or day to night, from minute to another, how flexible are we with the funding? How flexible are we with the support that we provide? I think this is one of the questions I wanted to put on the table to enrich our reflection. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for the question on flexibility. Other questions? There is a hand over there. And let's try to be short and concise in the question. That will be one way of us dealing with time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to be really quick. First of all, just a quick introductory. My name is Anmar Humeira. I'm from Sudanese American Space Association, SAPA, working on humanitarian response in Sudan. And my question is kind of granular from operation perspective. In such active conflicts like Sudan, scarcity of resources is always, is a huge hurdle for us. But it's also in terms of dealing with different intermediary partners, UN agencies at the same time, it's also confusing for organizations like us. So I was just wondering, from re-envisioning kind of how we are doing work, at least in such contexts like Sudan, what are the thoughts around bundling of these UN interventions in a way that could be well articulated for organizations like us, to work in a way that could help streamlining, first of all, the immediate intervention in a way more organized manner, and also preparing for future. The second element of my question is kind of linked to the first one, is investment on CSOs, which is a critical component also for us to hear more about it in active conflict zones, as well as, in fragility contexts as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's take those perhaps, because they point to the question on active conflict and how to deal with conflict, the need for flexibility, alignment of different roles. So maybe Mamta, I am going to ask you to come in first, and then Bill, but I'm also keen to hear from Catherine in terms of, what's the perspective on really on approaching this in active conflict situations.
Thank you, Christian. And I want to thank the person at the back for their question on flexibility. I think working in a fragile context requires real adaptive programming. Otherwise, it won't work because things change. And so I think that has to be a sine qua non to achieve any development outcomes in a fragile context. I want to come to the active conflict situation. Active conflict is it's hard to do development in active conflict situations. I think the governor from DRC made this point very well. So for a development actor like the World Bank, we think very carefully about whether we can achieve the outcomes that the development outcomes, given the fact that there's an active conflict going on. So there's a judgment call that is made, right, about the risks of continuing to engage. And often this is through CSOs. Can the development outcomes be achieved, or would they be totally compromised? Let me give the example of Yemen, because we have Her Excellency from Yemen here. And I think it's a good example. So in 2011, when there was active conflict in Yemen, we actually paused our programming, except for 6 well-functioning project implementation units, which were deemed as being able to deliver development outcomes despite the active conflict, working with a range of partners. So this is the kind of judgment that I'm talking about. And then, of course, when the transition government appeared and things settled down, our full programming began. But then again, in 2015, there was conflict. And this time, we reached the conclusion that actually the conflict is so vast that we really cannot, we need to suspend the program in entirety. And that's what we did. But I want to tell you that very soon after that, we realized that some health issues were so pressing, schistosomiasis, blindness, and population issues were so important that we decided we would resume, just in a very, if I may call it, surgical fashion, engagement in these 2 areas, working through partners, because even in a conflict situation, we felt we have to address these things. So I think it's about judgment calls. And I feel that we need to really strengthen these tools as a development actor on how to make these judgment calls. I'm not so sure that we make them consistently all the time everywhere, and we need to reach that that point in the development of our tools. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mamta. Bill, you want to add on this?
Sure. Thank you. I think the flexibility point is just absolutely critical. And I think those of us who are in the advocacy space have been pushing governments and donors to expand flexibility because the world is just changing so quickly. I think that. Thank you for making that point so strongly. In the active conflict, I mean, I think for me, the thing to remember is countries are much bigger than the conflicts usually. So in Sudan, thank you for raising, there is a lot of conflict and there's huge spaces where there isn't conflict. And there is the potential of doing development in those spaces. And so CRS, for example, is partnering with the bank in Sudan in what's called the Thabat project, where we are working through market-based agriculture in order to help farmers to grow, produce, sell, and go on generating income for their families, and also working on some nutrition outcomes. All those things can be done in a huge country, just maybe not exactly where the fighting is. And I think we have to expand our lens a little bit there. In terms of investment of CSOs, I think that's also absolutely critical. And Sudan, I think it's a great, the rapid response rooms, I think were just great examples of local initiatives that we're invested in. Now funding's been cut. I think that's really unfortunate. CRS has a program that we call Empower, where we are developing partners before crises so that when there's a crisis, there's a network. In Lebanon right now, we have 13 partners throughout the country delivering services in the south, in Beirut, in the north, in the Bekaa. And those partners we've been training and building the capacity on for years, and they don't really need that capacity building anymore, but it takes that kind of foresight. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Catherine, I want to bring you back in. You mentioned flexibility as one of the advice that you would give to development practitioners to help with the humanitarian response. So that was already spot on. But do you want to come in on also on this, and then the question on what to do in active conflict?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Christian. I would say just when you hear all these really fantastic interventions, I think it really illustrates how complex these environments are. It's hard sometimes to even communicate how difficult these situations are. Certainly, they're difficult for the populations that live there that we're trying to help. They're also really difficult for our staff. We've seen a lot of humanitarians really suffer in the last year, and I think we're constantly. I think Mamta was right about this. We're constantly making assessments about how much we can do, where we can do it. We have people in UNICEF who will say, almost no matter what the question, we have to be there, we stay and deliver. And I'm like, oh my Lord, I don't want to have staff, be killed or we just have really challenging things to deal with. So I think the flexibility is important, and we have to constantly assess the risks and figure out where we can be and what we can do effectively. I would, in response to the question about how to sort out dealing with the UN in Sudan, I thought that was an interesting question. I think, certainly when you the UN agencies have different mandates. So, people pretty much know with UNICEF, anything that has to do with children, and we take the lead on that. We take the lead on water and sanitation. But we also have a really good RCHC system there. And I think that's a good place of intervention for people who are unsure of who's most helpful and who is the right person to deal with in those settings. Having said that, again, the situation is so dynamic and not in a good way that it is worrying. Although I take the point that the colleague from CRS made, that there are parts of the country that are much quieter. I've been there twice now in the last year and a half, and I've seen that. And we continue to try to do the important work there. But I would say overall, when you look at the context, there's just huge numbers of children who are suffering from, real nutrition issues. Many children still out of school. Taken as a whole, the situation is very complex, and the difficulties are quite enormous. So I think, again, all these different comments, I really think illustrate just how challenging these situations are and how we have to all play the different roles that we play and to try to be at our best. One point I would make about the flexibility is the funding. I think that the trend is actually moving in a worse direction in terms of funding. And I don't say that with respect to the bank, but more generally, where donors are really earmarking funding for certain things, certain places. And we do need the flexibility to move quickly and respond quickly. And I think, giving us flexible funding makes that a lot easier. And in this world where it is, just increasingly difficult, certainly for children, I think having that flexibility makes a huge difference to us.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I just want to see whether there are more questions. There are some more questions. So we have the lady in the back and then two actually next to each other. So let's take advantage of proximity, and then a gentleman in the second row here.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Claire. I was one of the authors of the report on trade-offs in service delivery. I had the privilege of working with a fantastic team at the bank. So thank you. I want to say thank you for engaging with the idea of how effectiveness, potential to last, and avoiding harm can come into tension. And I learned a lot listening from you, because most of our research with TTLs around the bank was thinking about how you do this in active programs. But listening to you and thinking about the context of declining aid is making me think, how do you manage trade-offs when you're exiting? So how do you do an ethical exit from aid? And I'd like to ask the panelists to reflect on what that would look like.
Thank you. My name is Hélène Grogonnet, and I was the co-author of this report. I'm a former World Bank staff. The question I have is that, so this discussion was really fascinating, as we see that the trade-offs are seen differently from where you sit, and they although we all want to reach all these outcomes, the truth is that there are many moments where it's actually impossible. And the most obvious today would be like, you would want to be inclusive, but your financial envelope is going to cover 4 neighborhoods out of 10. It's an example from the report, right? So then you get all the questions coming. So I think that one of the things that will come is that the teams are going to be exposed to deciding what is coming first. And I would like to know from the panelists who are in leading organizations or even our decision makers on the political side, how could you make these discussions on trade-off more explicit? And do you have a space for that? Because I think that it's safe to say that it's not always actually always discussed as such, with the risk of not taking into account the impact that the decision to go maybe more speedily but less lasting, et cetera, will have on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. And then one more here, and then we need to draw the line because we want to give everyone a chance to give one last statement.
No, thank you very much. My name is Tajuddin Oyewale. I'm the UNICEF, from UNICEF Afghanistan. I just wanted to go back on the whole issue of political economy. And I think the interplay of power relations in fragile setting is a very important issue for us to distill, and the different levers where you can make change or not. Because often at time we discount that and we always go very technical in our approach. But I think the nuances, of the details in the negotiation, in the power play, sometimes gender, sometimes hierarchy, and sometimes it could even be at community level, does play a lot of role. And that can also contribute to the whole issues around flexibilities on how we design, we implement, and we deliver programs for people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So back to trade-offs and to flexibility. So let me ask those online to come in with any reflections on the questions asked in this round, maybe also the previous round. Let's start with the minister from Yemen to give us your reflections before we wrap up. And all of every panelist would please be focused because we have just a few minutes to spare. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like to talk about flexibility because it's very important, especially in conflict settings, to adapt such approaches because again, as it has been mentioned in the in the session, that countries usually bigger than conflict. And even within the same areas of conflict, you can find sometimes things can be improved and you can build on sustainable interventions and development interventions. And you can find IDPs, so who need urgent and emergency humanitarian support. So this kind of flexibility is very important, and things need to be decisions need to be taken very quickly. On the side of political economy, it's also very important because in fragile contexts we are not we are seeking for more stability, for political and security stability, and this comes sometimes from fulfilling improving the performance of the institutions, either in central or local areas. So building the capacities of these institutions, even though it's passed through conflict time, it enhanced the possibilities and the potential for more movement or moving toward durable peace, and also enhancing the potential for enrollment of youth, of those who are usually attracted by during fighting times for to be engaged more in work and job labor market better than going to be part of any conflict. Finally,
Minister,
yes.
Please, if you could wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just last thing, I think that the declining in funds and support to the conflict-prone countries or conflict-based countries is very crucial, and we need, to raise the voice, and among international players, that especially these countries need more, more focus and more support to overcome the fragility that they are living in. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Governor, very briefly.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say that, again, oblige me, please, if I can just say again that we are in a conflict situation as we are talking now here between different armed groups and between different forces. And let me come back again on the fact that it's very critical, whatever initiative will be engaged, it should really take in consideration the power dynamics on the ground. And I think that it will be, again, very critical for every kind of initiative which could be undertaken to take in consideration the ongoing peace deal. Therefore, all stakeholders should really try to see how to engage in the peace deal. For instance, in the Eastern Congo, as we are talking, there are 3 peace deals ongoing: Washington, Doha, and Geneva, but none of them engage women negotiators. Whether most of the majority of the victims are women, but you don't find a single women negotiator. We don't find a representative youth group in these negotiation teams. So I think that key stakeholders who are engaged in development in that region should really think pushing the belligerent to engage women's organizations, women representatives in these peace deals, and we can reach the point. Now, I want just to highlight the fact that despite the war going on, the economy is very dynamic. The economic activities are very, very dynamic between Rwanda, Burundi, and DRC. And therefore, the war didn't start the business transactions. So what I could strongly recommend is that in the zones which are released by the enemies, it will be important for the World Bank, for instance, to maintain the project which has been already initiated before the war. So this is part of the issue that we are discussing with the World Bank. And I'd like to highlight the fact that it will be important to support the tax collection processes. According to our researchers, South Kivu province, as we are talking now, if we could implement our tax collection mechanism that we are trying to put in place, we could generate 33 million US dollars every month. This
Governor, thank you very much. I apologize for having to cut you off, but we're really running out of time. I want to give a 1 minute opportunity to Mohammed to give us your parting shot based on the conversation that we've had.
Thank you very much. I think I will just answer a reflection on the trade-off. I think right now our duty as local government units, in order we have to improve, let's say, first of all, some of the revenues in order to go on with the services. And I think having the all financing partners working under one program is more, efficient than having scattered, interventions here or there. Maybe this can compensate some of the cutoff from the donors in money in their funding. So in general, I think, and then I think this is what we always in our institution asking our financing partners, if there will be a cut, I think there should be an exit plan strategy in order to give us some time in order to prepare ourselves for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I apologize, we're running out of time. So apologize for poor timekeeping on my part. But I think we've had a very rich conversation and a lot of issues that came out. So I'm taking away from this, perhaps no trade-offs, but tensions to work through. The importance of principles. I go back to what Catherine was saying at the beginning, align where possible, work in parallel, when needed. Have the eyes on building systems from the get-go. So I think what is really going to be critical to as we work through those tensions is to have some clear principles that are explicit to everyone and that we're working off. That orientation as we navigate very, very complex and not just protracted, but dynamic contexts that diversify in the way they play out across territories. So those kind of coordinates of principles that should guide action are absolutely critical as we work through the tensions. So with this, I would like to thank you for your interest. I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their perspectives and experiences and making this a very rich panel. And I wish you a very nice rest of the Fragility Forum, everyone.